1st, 2021. 2021. Here we go. Here we go. Shout out to the family of Miss Cicely Tyson, to the fans, to all of her close acquaintances. Sometimes your close acquaintances are as close or closer than your blood relationships. And I just feel in my heart to honor this iconic woman who pioneered in the entertainment field the African American presence, African American female presence. And God gave her longevity. God gave her honor. God gave her esteem. She was beloved. Oh my goodness, this woman was beloved. I watched her last interview with Miss Gayle King on CBS, and how Gayle asked Miss Tyson, Cicely Tyson, how she wanted to be remembered, and her words went deep into the soil of my heart. And she said, I want people to remember me by, she did her best. She did her best. I really think those words are true. She did her best. And in doing her best, she maxed out her call. She maxed out her life. She blessed people. She inspired people. Some people edify in the kingdom. We get edified. But then others people inspire. And both are good. Both lift. Both are uplift. One is liberation. Edification has a way of releasing and lifting. But inspiration has a way of lifting but invoking the search and more. And for a person to want more, seek more, and not settle into apathy, not settle into the conundrums of life and because of the vicissitudes of life. So both are good, both work. I mean, I learned this when I'm watching Magic Johnson do his triple doubles, and I saw what it did to people when he would just he was rightly named. He would create magic on the court. It was magic. Even though it was Irvin, but his purpose, because of his purpose, he created magic. And you know, Miss Tyson, she created magic on the screen, but she also was presence. She was the power of presence. And so I'm messing up here with my phone, and I need to leave my phone alone and do the radio. And so, yeah, I just wanted to give her tribute and respect and honor because she earned it. She deserves it. And so, God bless the memory and the life of Miss Cicely Tyson. So how y'all doing today? How's it going? How's it going on the last day of January in 2021? Where are you at? Do you even know? I mean, have you considered it? Have you done an assessment from January 1st to January 31st? Where are you at? There's a whole lot that happened in January. And I won't try to recall all that happened. We've lost many giants already. We have a new administration in the White House. So many changes, transitions occurring. Unfortunately, so many deaths, multiple deaths, have thrown people into the throes of grief. Grief can be very complex, and one thing about grief is it's exacerbated by unresolved conflict. I said that last week, I think, that it is exacerbated by unresolved conflict. And so people try to make peace with other people and resolve issues on the deathbed because they want to die in peace. When there's unresolved conflict, the conflict has a way of reframing itself to those that are left behind, and it causes multiple disturbance and despair, sorrow, because people don't even know how to deal with and handle the fact that the person who maybe was the object of the conflict is now gone. So a lot of times therapists will have somebody, a client, talk to and do role playing and talk to them or talk to an empty chair or some kind of use imagination, trying to resolve conflict in order to make peace and dismiss grief. Grief is a very interesting emotion, a state of being. Grief and shame are two of the strongest emotions that human beings suffer. Grief and shame. Many times they are integrated. Many times shame brings on grief. Grief can bring on shame. But I want to so I want to kind of look at grief from the perspective of grief can be grief can be as a result of a loss that is not associated with the death of a person, but the death of a dream. Grief can be associated with not what did happen, but what didn't happen. Grief can also be generated through trauma. Now, we reviewed Joseph and the life of Joseph last week, and I want to get right into this because I want to talk about today when you don't have grief, but grief has you. When you don't have grief, you may not necessarily have a grip on grief, but grief has a grip on you. And I looked at Joseph's life last week, how he was 17 years old, very beloved by his father, naive, cocky, arrogant kind of young man, gifted, chosen by his father, chosen by God for greatness, grossly immature, very untrained relationally in the family system, and it invoked a lot of provocation to the extent it provoked his brothers to contempt, to jealousy, and the father looking on. It didn't seem like Jacob was doing much correcting, and so Joseph got away with it. And then the father sent Joseph one day to look on his brothers, to check on them because they were out in Dothan, away from the home. And Joseph, in obedience to his father, went out to check on his brothers. And while he was away from his father, his brothers saw the opportunity to express their contempt and their jealousy, their disdain for their younger brother. So, there's this backstory. And it happens over a protracted period of time. It happens over years. And it's like the jealousy and the contempt continue to just grew and grew and grew, or it festered over time. And now it's red hot, it's ripe. So his brothers stripped him of his coat. And, because jealousy makes people, it's a spirit, and it makes a person feel that somebody else has what they think they should have. So they took the coat. We're older than you. We may have different mothers, but we were here way before you. Here's this little Spitfire coming up here, getting our father's favor and getting special treatment and special attention and special perks and validation that we're entitled to. He kicked us to the curb and picked you up like you bee's knees, and you the prince of the mostness of all of the allness, and they wanted to be the mostness of the allness. It was their insecurity, and yeah, they weren't wrong. It was happening, but their interpretation of it was, attack back. Attack it, kill it. Let's appease our egos and appease ourselves and just do away with Joseph, and these problems will go away. Well, they ended up putting him in a cistern, taking him out of the cistern, a cistern that was dry. Reuben was going to double back and pick up Joseph. But in the meantime, some Midianites and Ishmaelites came by, and Joseph is now traumatized, grieve. See, trauma has a way of defining a person in the moment. Something happens in the brain. Okay, something happens in the brain with trauma. And a person becomes fixated in that trauma if it's not those feelings and that imagination is not dealt with and rewired. So he went down and first of all, he got physically assaulted. It was assault and battery. He's spoken to harshly by his brothers. That's assault. But the battery, they stripped Joseph of his coat. They got physical. They bullied this man. They bullied this young man. He's 17 years old. And so Joseph is traumatized, and then the trauma increases because they put him now in a cistern in the ground. Okay, so get in Joseph's head. Get inside of Joseph. What's going on with Joseph? Can't you see? That's not the life he's used to. That's not the life he knew. He knew favor. He knew content. He knew protection. He knew contentment. This was a rush. This happened all at once. And I wonder even with you, did the unexpected hit you? You didn't see it coming. It was like a sucker punch. All of a sudden, life is coming for you. All of a sudden, boom, good turns bad. All of a sudden, good turns trauma. All of a sudden, you're used to safety, a sense of safety, but trauma has a way of building in fear and building in insecurity. And so Joseph is down in the ground, traumatized. And sometimes trauma is so great in the moment, you don't even have time to feel the grief yet. I mean, the grief has a way of disappointing, grave disappointment. But the trauma is all the other stuff. And so, Joseph is experiencing all of this. He's experiencing all of this. And then he gets sold to Ishmaelites. Now, the trauma and the grief have to go into resilience and survival. Now the boy got to be strong. Now the boy has to become a man overnight. Now he's got to man up. Now he's got to find some. Now he's got to use his wits and his gifts and his favor and all that he has learned to survive. He goes into survival mode. He finds himself in Potiphar's house. He finds himself in Egypt. Potiphar has a wife. She looks on Joseph, and long story short, she tries to seduce him. He says no. He tells her, no, I can't do this. No. She sets him up and has him falsely accused of rape. And she was believed. Her husband believed her because Joseph was a Hebrew. He was an Egyptian. So, Potiphar believed his wife. He'd been around his wife longer than he'd been around Joseph. There had been no foundation of trust built to that extent. Potiphar's still waiting to see if he could trust this guy, and he felt betrayed. He said, I give you all this favor, I give you my kingdom, I give you everything but my wife, and what do? Come from my wife, even though it was a lie. And his wife knew that. So now Joseph finds himself in prison unjustly. Well, the whole story looks is unjust. Can you see the grief and the trauma escalating? Joseph is constantly being punished now for what he did right, not what he did wrong. He's being unjustly punished. It's a criminal injustice. And so he finds himself in prison, and he gets favor in the prison because God's hand is on him. He has favor in the prison. And then two of the prisoners, one's a butcher and one's a baker, have dreams. Well, Joseph is gifted in dream interpretation. And so Joseph gives the interpretation of the butcher's dream and the baker's dream, tells the butcher in 3 days, a couple of days, you're going to be restored to the king's service, and tells the baker in the same amount of days, you're going to say bye-bye to the earth. They're going to take your head off. Exactly what he said. But Joseph asked them, but when you go before Potiphar, please remember me and tell him I interpreted these dreams for you. Well, it happened just like Joseph said it would happen, but they forgot about Joseph. And it took 2 more whole years. Can you imagine how Joseph felt sitting in that prison for 2 extra years after he helped somebody else get out? With his dream interpretation that God gave him. And all of this is happening to Joseph blindly. And what I mean by that is there doesn't seem to be any real reason why this horrible turn of events in Joseph's life occurred from the moment his father told him, go check on your brothers in Dothan. He ends up here. How did I get here? It's like fate. It's like all of the weird circumstances. It just seemed like bad luck, back to back to back to back. Losses. And so these traumas, back to back to back to back. After a point in time, all of those repressed feelings, all of that repressed trauma took a hold of Joseph. It got a grip on him. And I'm going to show you. I'm going to show you in the scripture where I'm going to show you his humanity. Because you know what? I'm going to tell you something. Just because you are called, you love the Lord, you serve the Lord, that does not make you exempt from trouble. It does not make you exempt from challenges. It does not make you exempt from things happening in life that traumatize you, and you are left to deal with it. And if you don't deal with it, at some point in time, it's going to deal with you. That's what the Psalms are all about. Have you ever really read the Psalms? When the Psalms are prophetic prayers put to music, but they emote the human experience. And sometimes the Psalms are directed to God in praise. But then I don't know if anybody's ever heard of something called imprecatory Psalms, like Psalm 109, Psalm 137. At the end of Psalm 137, it turns into this hardcore human plea to take their babies and dash them against the stone. Those are the words. Remember what the Edomites did to us. Edomites being their cousins. And when the Babylonians came in on Israel, the Edomites was like, get them, get them, get them. So not only was it traumatic violence against Israel, it was emotional betrayal as well. Grief was compounded. And what did the psalmist remember? The feelings. the feelings. The trauma brought on feelings. Psalms are there for you when you don't know what to do with your feelings. A lot of people, if you're like me, push those feelings down. Like Joseph, pushing his feelings down. It's called repressing. Repress them down. Why? Because I gotta be strong. I gotta be strong. I don't have time to be vulnerable. I don't have time to be crying. I don't have time to be weak. I'm too busy. I can't do that. I can't do that right now. And even when I do take and have a meltdown and cry, it doesn't take it away. It doesn't take it away. There is release. There is a release of pressure after you allow yourself to express your feelings. Yeah, there's release. The tears are there. Tears are there to wash away some of those feelings. Wash away. But what I like about the Psalms are, the difference is, instead of just crying about the feelings, you're telling God. You're telling God about the feelings. You and God get together in these feelings. See, I don't want to get ahead of myself, but I want to talk to you today because there's so many people that don't have grief. Grief has you, and because you don't have the understanding of what you need to do in order to get out of that space. And then I'm telling you, sometimes you need to turn Netflix off because sometimes you can learn things from watching movies because you got these good writers out there that are trying to write relatable material. But sometimes you just need to get on YouTube and do research and whatever your issue is. Learn grief, about grief. You just Google on YouTube about grief or teachings about grief. And I'm just saying, educate yourself. Educate yourself. Grief is so almost scientific. It's so scientific. You have cultures that have professional mourners because they know what grief can do to you physically, spiritually, emotionally. It carries out into every other area in your life. But it has a grip on you, and you don't have a grip on it. So let's go back to Joseph. So now Joseph is sitting here in this prison, and there's no hope in sight. Am I going to die here? I'm left to die. I can't imagine how grief just took him up one side and down the other. But he's sitting there hopelessly because life took a turn. Life took a turn. So many of you, so many of us in 2020, 2021, life has taken a turn, an unforeseen turn. An unforeseen turn. We had a loved one die. I had loved ones die. I did not expect to die. And it's hard for me to wrap my head around it. It's hard for me to wrap my feelings around it. So when people die, life changes. Did you know that? It changes the game. When a baby is born, game change. When a person dies, game change. So that go-to person, that person who served as the negotiator for the family, the person who was the light in darkness on the family tree. You know what I mean by that. That you always, family systems have that one person that come on, let's get along, let's get together. Come on, don't say that, don't do that. Come on, let's get together and have a family dinner. Let's speak positive. Ask for forgiveness. You know, that each family system has the person that's, you know, trying to promote goodness and love and respect and the right things. And every family system has that one devilish person that speaks out of turn and speaks inconveniently, speaks in, and I could say ignorantly, because they promote trouble. They stir the pot. They're verbal abusers. They misbehave. And every family system has that person as well. And grief is in the cracks and crevices of these family systems. Grief has a way of finding its way in, and so then when somebody dies, when that peacemaker dies, that spiritual icon, yes, Holy Spirit, that spiritual icon dies. Now what? Now what? Especially when that icon dies and it seems like it's out of season, or you weren't ready. You weren't ready. You weren't ready for that. You weren't ready. That's the person you went to for your strength. So now what am I going to do? Now what am I going to do? How am I going to find my way? How am I going to find my way? You got to take time to process grief. You can keep going. You can put on the overcoat of strength. Hear me, because my listeners, I love y'all. I'm telling you something. I'm a little vulnerable today. I love y'all. Thank you for your support. Thank you for listening to the word. But hear me. Don't make the mistake I made. I'm going there today. Don't make the mistake I made. What mistake did you make, Dr. Z? I'm going to tell you the mistake I made, okay? I was 19 years old when my mother died. My mother was my everything. I was 19. She was my best friend. When people say, well, who are your best friends? My mother was my best friend. I had peers, but none of them was my BFF, my best friend forever. My mother was my BFF. I sat there with her. We watched Lawrence Welk on Saturday nights because she liked that. I didn't care. I just wanted her. I was comfortable next to her. She did it for me. I would wash her hair, press her hair, and she just let me touch her, handle her. She was my soul. She was my soul. She was everything to me. And then she got cancer. Hey, Rashid, you got a Kleenex? Because I'm going to need one. Just take a deep breath. But I need to share this with you because I need to help you. I need to talk to you today. She was everything to me. How can I get emotional now? Thank you, Rashid. I just love www.acceleratorradio.net. Brother Kevin Nash and Rashid. How do I get emotional now after 45 years in? I get full. I get emotional because I learned recently, very recently, I learned that I survived that traumatic loss with my mother's demise June 4th, 1975. 5 a.m. She went to heaven. I got the call from Kaiser Hospital. This is Dr. So-and-so. Just want to inform you Sarah Burrell has passed away. Ugh. And I picked up the phone and called my older sister and told her, and it went from there. I wasn't ready for that. I was 19. I wasn't ready for that. And recently, just recently, I got blessed. I got blessed. And you know how I got blessed? I got blessed to learn how to sit with God long enough, how to listen to my body intently enough, and how to go inward enough, deep enough to let God work on the inside of me. Because what I realized after he loosed the grip of grief off my soul, I was able to see that at 19, I went from being traumatized straight into surviving, like Joseph did. I may not even get to the end of Joseph's story today. We might have to pick it up again next week. But I need to talk to you today because some of y'all are struggling. You're at a place now where maybe your grief is new. And I'm going to tell you what not to not do. But at the other people, this is resonating with you because you did what I did. And I'm going to tell you what to do. Okay, so what I learned that I did was that I put on the overcoat of resilience and I went into being strong in life and I went into trying to figure it out with my logic while I was praying. I've always accepted God. I've always looked to God. When I became a child of God at 10 years old and I made a vow to God, I kept my vow. And I've always had a heart for God. I may have had an empty head, but I had a full heart. And it's my heart that carried me through the years. I never was that person that you could call a backslider. I'm not a backslider. My actions might look like I'm a backslider, but in my heart I'm not a backslider. I'm God's child acting a fool. But you don't call me no backslider because I've never considered myself a backslider. I was God's erring child. God's child needing information. God's child needing guidance. God's child needing correction. But always God's child. But I was also very acquainted with sadness. Very acquainted with sorrow, very acquainted with despair. I was just generally, I was living above the deep crevice of unresolved grief. Grief became a part of my identity. Grief became a part of me because I never got past it. I never got past the trauma. My life never went back pre-trauma, pre-death. And and when I say go back, I'm talking about at least finding a peaceful landing to where I made peace with it. No. I just lived alongside it. Good friends, good people helping me get through life. This is while I'm ministering, growing, going to school. Raising a child, living life, not understanding and not seeing that the depths of the core of my identity was tied up in grief. And I'm talking about just my life in the limited quarters of Los Angeles, and a trip every now and then. I'm not necessarily even addressing the macro. I mean, that's the micro, but the macro picture of being a black woman in America, that's a whole nother conversation. Because there's a grief that comes with that. You know, the microaggressions and the implicit bias and the outright racism and all that, and you know, all the sexism and all the denial thereof, and all the missed opportunities that come with that. Oh, Lord. But this is the thing I want to get at today, because I believe one of the gifts of 2020, this abruptness of the pandemic and its ongoing nature, how it flipped the system of our lifestyle and challenged it face to face, how I'm starting to understand and see people's responses to it. It opened up an opportunity for correction in areas that people didn't even realize they needed to be corrected. We were so locked into the grip of the oppression of the system was feeding itself at our expense. You know, I always talk about being in that traffic, going to work, going back home in that traffic and having 3 or 4 hours to myself and getting up day by day doing the same thing. Well, the pandemic changed all that. But what it also did, it sent me home. And when it sent me home, I was at home with me in a way I'd never had to be with me since I was a teenager. You know, when you're a teenager and you're at home, you got your friends, you got your phone, you got school, but you know, I can't do this and I can't do that, but there's some freedom. Sleeping in, eating junk food, sports, whatever. Just kind of, you know, teenage years can be hard, but they can be very, very fun. Well, I had not had the opportunity, the flexibility of even considering myself, considering options. Now I'm sitting at home with options. You know, yeah, I'm working virtually, but I can choose when I get up. I can choose when I eat now. I don't have to eat on schedule necessarily. I mean, I got some choices now, but I also, what came with all of that flexibility and freedom was harsh and unexpected realities about me. And so I told you, you know, on an earlier show that in March, you know, I panicked first and I stressed, and then I started doing the stress eating and went back into an eating addiction. And then I started the fasting and doing the disciplines. And then out of the disciplines, I was led to therapy. And then the therapy opened me up like you open up a rose in a beautiful sunshiny day. But then all the same time, I'm going deeper and deeper and deeper in the routine and discipline of not just praying, because I've always been a prayer warrior, but my praying, I actually learned the benefit of sitting with God. So now I'm sitting intentionally with the Lord every day, where I may talk, God may talk, scripture may talk. Sometimes it's deep meditation, but it's the stillness. It's the stillness and the opportunity to have the time to do it. And then I got this book out of therapy, The Body Keeps the Score. And I learned from my therapist, and I learned from the book how what trauma was doing to my brain, and how my body was informing me of the trauma that it was experiencing, and how to listen to my body, and how to sit and respect my body and let feelings come up and out. Okay, and this came out of therapy, which came out of the revelation of fasting, which came out, I mean, it was like stepping stones. One led to this, to this, to this, to this. And so now here I am now in the discipline of sitting with God, and going deeper, 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 and seeing the changes from the inside on the outside. Now, what's going on the inside of me? What's happening was on the inside of me is that in my time of sitting with God on a daily basis and listening to my body, those two things, it was spirit in its body and its soul. It's all three, okay? So that I'm hearing the Spirit of God and watching for God. I'm like, God, what's on your heart today? What's on your mind? Okay? And in my soul, I'm experiencing these feelings, and the feelings is happening inside my body. And I learned to listen to my body. And the way that I can feel the feelings is because I'm sitting still. So I'm sitting there long enough. Sometimes you can put on music, the right music, when you sit in church. You do it in church. You do the same thing in church. Although the church doors are closed, you can do it at home. You can sit, put on that anointed prayer music. I call it prayer music. And you just, like right before service, and then the musicians will set the atmosphere, right? The musicians will set the atmosphere. And as you sit there, you are sitting there still, connected, seeking God. Yeah. And you're doing anything, and then all of a sudden you're prayerful, you're full of prayer, you enter in, and you're in church, and then the music helps. You can do that at home. You can do that at home. And I found myself doing it at home. And just like it benefited me at church, do you know it benefited me at home? So the most recent thing that happened, and I do it as a discipline. That means, listen, when you got a discipline, I guess, Joseph, we're going to talk about you next week. I guess I got to share. Joseph, I got to share with my listeners about me today, and then we're going to hit you next week and talk about how grief gripped Joseph. But I'm talking about how grief gripped Dr. Z today, and how I had a relationship with grief that became very apathetic and became very, very a part of me, and I didn't understand and really even know that I had done it. And how I was generally uptight, but nice. A nice person, but generally uptight, and didn't know it, and living like that. Just kind of blessed and miserable. And it's nothing to condemn, it's something to describe. And I hope I'm saying something that's helpful to somebody today. So I learned in the discipline to do it faithfully. I remember when my dear friend Fred Davis passed away. It was recent. And I was praying and wearing it and praying it before it happened. And I kind of saw how the trend was going, but I was believing God. And then Pastor Diana Amaker in Chicago, so faithful woman of God. Oh my goodness. And leading the people of God in prayer for him systematically as a discipline. Well, all of us just holding on. And then God took Freddie to heaven. God took Freddie. And I remember going numb. I got the call from his niece, and I went numb. I just numbed out. And I knew I had been, sitting with my body and my feelings, so I knew I was numb. And when I was numb, I wasn't feeling like, spiritual. I wasn't feeling like praying. I was numb. I'm going to tell you the truth. What I really felt like doing that morning was turning on Turner Classic Movies, because I like the spirit of the movies. It's kind of quiet and storytelling, and it's kind of easy, and you can just listen to them with all their drama, and just put my head under the covers and just be numb. That's how I felt. Just lay there, just be numb, just nothing. I couldn't cry. I was numbed out. Well, guess what? I was in grief. That was real grief. Real grief, the first stage is shock. I was in shock. I was numbed out in shock. Same thing happened when mother died. It just took me into shock. And the shock protects you. Your brain protects you from the trauma until you can kind of ease into it and deal with it and process it. Okay. But remember, I had been getting up every morning with God. So that morning, I was like, oh man, I am messed up. I'm messed up here. And I sat there and I thought about it. And I said, well, I guess I'll go on and sit. So I went to my spot where I meet the Lord every morning. And I sat there a minute. And just like I'm talking to you, I started talking to God. I said, listen, I'm here today, but I'm in bad shape. I said, the reason why I came today is because I thought about it. And Lord, you haven't done anything to me that would justify me not showing up here for you when we sit every morning together. We sit every morning. So why should I take it out on you? So today, you got me, I'm here, but I'm pretty tore up. I'm in a mess, but you want me, you got me. But here I am. I'm not in good shape. I'm not in good shape. But I am here. And I sat there. With the prayer music. But remember, prayer music was not doing nothing because I'm numbed out. I sat there for a minute. And I got still, quiet. And all of a sudden, the prayer music that I play, one of the songs that came on was I Feel Jesus. I feel Jesus. I feel Jesus. I feel Jesus in this place. Yes, my soul does burn within me. I feel Jesus in this place. And something clicked in from my mind to my soul, and I knew the Lord was there. In a moment, it happened in a moment. Hard to find words for it. And all of a sudden, I was able to weep. It broke something. Grief has a grip. Grief has a strength. Grief will hold you, but it can't hold Jesus. And I sat with the Lord. I sit with the Lord every morning. And I sat, and the song reminded me that God was there, and somehow I was able to weep. And when I started weeping, I was weeping for the loss of Fred. I was weeping. I needed to weep. I wept and I wept and I was able to weep, and it was a release. And I was able to feel again. Now, I'm still grieving the loss of my dear friend who was, he's just a good friend, man. He's a good friend. He's a great loss. We used to talk about this day. We used to talk about one day you'll grieve me or I'll grieve you. Well, Freddie beat me. He grieved me. He's grieving me. But I'm not grieving like somebody that doesn't have some kind of hope, or it's not a despairing grief. With my mother, it was a despairing grief. I just wasn't ready, and I didn't have understanding, and I couldn't accept her death. And for many years, I was so upset. It was like, Mama, if you hadn't died, my life wouldn't have flipped like a flapjack, and I wouldn't be so upset. And as I grew through the years and matured, I remember going to the graveyard and, because I've always had this connection, intimate connection with God. And in the graveyard, God gave me the revelation. He gave me the revelation, that he took my mother. He took her. And he gave me the revelation that I was making her responsible for my happiness, and that it wasn't fair. That she had lived her life. She had lived her days. And she had raised me better than being dependent like that. And so I made peace with that part of it and assured my mother that I would leave there and take greater responsibility for myself, because I was a compliant child and I was just really so close to her. And so I left there with a different level of understanding and a different kind of release. But still, I didn't know that I still held grief. Because remember now, this was many years later, like over 30 years later when that happened. Well, I'll tell you because I'm only a couple minutes away from finishing today's sharing, that very recently, through my sitting with the Lord and growing in God and doing the inner work. So you got to go inward. I'm going to tell you something right now. If you listen to me, I want you to hear me real good. You are not going to find you on the outside of you. You're not going to find yourself, and you're not going to find your identity, and you're not going to find your peace that you're looking for on the outside. It's got to go. You got to go inward, and you got to take time with yourself, make yourself a priority, spend some time with you, by yourself, about you, and let you and God work that thing out. And the beauty of that is you can do it anywhere, at any time, all the time. You always have an opportunity to go inward. Search me, O God. That's Psalm 139. See if there be any wicked, any vexation in me. Is there anything in me that's vexing me? Is there anything that has got me grieved? Is this because for me, what I did was that I had grief had got such a grip on me from just living with it for so many years. I didn't know that I needed to be freed from the grips of grief in my soul. But when I learned to listen to my body, and I learned to trust the voice of God, I learned how to not repress the feelings, let the feelings come up and come out. All this is done privately. I learned to let the tears come in waves, Ride the wave, let it come out, and once it's out, it's out. And I learned that I had to have my identity without my mother. I'm God's child on the earth. He put me here. He used her. But it's me and God against this world. I hope I helped you. I sure did try. I'm going to see you next week. We're going to talk about Joseph next week. Okay.